The lightning split the Montana sky like God's own fury, illuminating the forest in stark black and white for one terrifying moment before plunging everything back into darkness. Marcus Brennan pulled his horse to a halt, rain cascading from the brim of his hat as he squinted through the downpour. He should have turned back an hour ago when the first thunder rolled across the valley, but his prize bull had broken through the fence again, and losing livestock meant losing everything. Another flash of lightning, and this time he saw something that made his blood freeze. 30 yards ahead, crumpled against the base of a massive pine tree, lay a human figure. The rain was coming down so hard it was like standing under a waterfall, and whoever it was wasn't moving. Marcus dismounted and ran through the mud, his boots slipping on the treacherous ground. As he got closer, another lightning strike revealed the truth that made his heart pound with more than just exertion. It was a young native woman, maybe 17 or 18, and she was unconscious. Blood mixed with rainwater ran from a deep gash on her forehead, and her left arm hung at an unnatural angle. In this part of Montana, in 1876, finding an injured native person on your land could mean anything from a misunderstanding to a death sentence. The tensions between the settlers and the local Blackfoot tribe had been escalating for months, with raids and retaliations creating a cycle of violence that seemed to have no end. Most ranchers would have ridden away, unwilling to risk getting caught in the middle of something that could destroy their lives. But Marcus had spent 4 years as a field medic during the Civil War, and some instincts ran deeper than fear or politics. This was a human being dying in the storm, and he couldn't walk away. He knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. Her pulse was weak but steady, and her breathing was shallow but regular. The head wound was serious, but not immediately fatal. The arm was definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. She needed shelter, warmth, and medical attention, and she needed it fast. "Easy there," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him over the storm. "I'm going to help you." Marcus looked around desperately. His ranch was 3 miles through some of the roughest terrain in the territory, and carrying an unconscious person that distance in this weather would be nearly impossible. But the alternative was leaving her to die, and that wasn't an option his conscience could accept. He carefully lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, despite being tall for a woman. Her traditional dress was soaked through and torn in several places, and he could see other injuries that would need attention once they reached shelter. His horse, a steady mare named Rosie, snorted nervously as he approached with his burden. "I know, girl. This is going to be rough for all of us." He managed to get the unconscious woman positioned across the saddle, then swung up behind her, holding her steady with one arm while guiding Rosie with the other. The journey back to his ranch became a nightmare of mud, lightning, and constant fear that the woman would slip from his grasp. The rain never let up, and twice they had to stop when Rosie stumbled on the treacherous ground. Each time Marcus checked to make sure his passenger was still breathing, still alive. By the time they reached his small ranch house, both man and horse were exhausted. Marcus carried the woman inside and laid her on his bed, the only furniture suitable for treating injuries. He built up the fire in the hearth until the cabin was warm and filled with flickering light, then gathered his medical supplies, what little he had. Cleaning the head wound revealed it was deep but clean, probably from striking a rock during a fall. The broken arm was more serious, requiring careful splinting and binding. As he worked, Marcus found himself studying her face. She was beautiful in a way that transcended culture or circumstance, with high cheekbones and strong features that spoke of both dignity and determination. More concerning were the other injuries he discovered. Bruises on her ribs suggested she'd taken a serious fall, and there were scrapes and cuts that indicated she'd been running through rough terrain. Whatever had brought her to that pine tree, it hadn't been a casual walk in the woods. As dawn approached, and the storm finally began to subside, the woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and confused, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with the wariness of someone accustomed to danger. When she saw Marcus sitting nearby, her entire body tensed. "Where am I?" she asked in clear English, though her accent carried the musical cadence of her native language. "My ranch. You were hurt badly in the storm. I brought you here to help. You heal." Marcus kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "My name is Marcus Brennan. What's yours?" She studied his face for a long moment, as if weighing whether to trust him. "Kaya," she said finally. "Kaya Crowwing." "Well, Kaya Crowwing, you're safe here. Your arm is broken and you have a concussion, but you're going to be fine." For the first time since opening her eyes, she seemed to relax slightly. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you help me?" It was a fair question, and one Marcus had been asking himself all night. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. Outside, the first rays of sunshine were breaking through the dissipating storm clouds, painting the wet landscape in shades of gold and green. What neither Marcus nor Kaya knew was that the storm had been the least of their worries. As the sun climbed higher, bringing warmth and light to the valley, it also revealed something that would test every assumption Marcus had about courage, kindness, and the price of doing what's right. The test was coming, and it would arrive with the dawn. Marcus woke to an unnatural silence. No birds singing their morning songs, no cattle lowing in the distance. Even the wind seemed to have died. Completely. Something was wrong. He sat up from the chair where he dozed off while watching over Kaya, his neck stiff from the uncomfortable position. She was still sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and strong. The fever that had worried him during the night had broken, and color was returning to her cheeks. But the silence outside continued to press against the cabin like a living thing. Moving carefully to avoid waking his patient, Marcus crossed to the window and peered through the glass. What he saw made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. They were everywhere. Blackfoot warriors sat motionless on their horses in a perfect circle around his ranch. Marcus counted quickly, his heart hammering against his ribs. 12 men, maybe. 15, all armed with rifles and traditional weapons. Their faces were painted for war, and they sat with the stillness of carved stone, watching his cabin with eyes that revealed nothing. "They've come for me." Kaya's voice was barely a whisper behind him. Marcus turned to find her sitting up in bed, her face pale but alert. She was looking past him toward the window, and he could see she understood the gravity of their situation, as well as he did. "How long have they been there?" she asked. "I don't know, I just woke up." Marcus kept his voice calm, but his mind was racing. "Are they your people?" "My brother and cousins. The tall one on the spotted horse is Red Hawk, our war chief. The one beside him is my brother, Storm Walker." Her voice carried both love and fear. "They think you've taken me captive." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Taking a native woman captive was one of the gravest offenses possible, usually answered with death, not just for the perpetrator, but for anyone associated with him. How do we tell them the truth? Very carefully. Kaya struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as her broken arm shifted. In our culture, silence before action is sacred. They're giving you time to prove your intentions before they decide your fate. And how exactly do I do that? Before she could answer, a new sound cut through the morning air. A single low note from a war horn, blown once and allowed to fade into silence. The warriors remained motionless, but Marcus could feel the tension increase like pressure before. "A thunderstorm. That was the first warning," Kaya said urgently. "They'll give 2 more before they act. You need to show them I'm here willingly, that I'm safe and unharmed." Marcus looked at her splintered arm and bandaged head. "You're clearly harmed, but not by you. They need to see that you've cared for me, that you've honored me as you would your own sister." She met his eyes with startling intensity. Marcus, in my culture, the care of an injured person is sacred. If they believe you saved my life rather than threatened it, they'll see you very differently. And if they don't believe it? The second, Hornblast, answered his question longer and deeper than the first. Through the window, Marcus could see one of the warriors, a young man with fierce eyes and intricate face paint, shifting restlessly on his horse. The others remained statue still, but the air seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. "We need to go outside," Kaya said, though she was clearly still weak. "Together. They need to see me walking freely, speaking for myself. You can barely stand. Your arm is broken, but I can walk, and I can speak." She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly but remaining upright. "This is the only way, Marcus. Trust has to be shown, not just spoken." The third horn blast would come soon, and with it the end of talking time. Marcus looked at this brave young woman who was willing to risk her own safety to save his life, and made his decision. "All right," he said, moving to support her good arm. "Let's go show them who we really are." As they approached the cabin door, the silence outside seemed to deepen, as if the entire world was holding its breath to see what would happen next. The cabin door opened with a creak that seemed to echo across the entire valley. Marcus stepped out first, his hands visible and empty, with Kaya leaning against his shoulder for support. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard, but nothing moved except the gentle flutter of the warrior's feathers in the breeze. 15 pairs of dark eyes watched their every step. The war chief Redhawk sat tall on his spotted horse directly in front of the cabin. His face was a masterpiece of war paint, black and red stripes that made his expression unreadable. But his eyes, Marcus noticed, weren't looking at him. They were fixed on Kaya with an intensity that spoke of deep concern and barely controlled. Rage, Stormwalker, positioned to Redhawk's right, was younger but no less intimidating. The family resemblance to Kaya was unmistakable in the strong jawline and proud bearing. His grip on his rifle was steady, ready to raise and fire at the first sign of treachery. Kaya spoke first, her voice carrying clearly across the silent yard. She spoke in Blackfoot, her words flowing like music despite the strain in her voice. Marcus couldn't understand the language, but he could hear the emotion, the respect, and something that sounded like gratitude. Redhawk's expression didn't change, but his horse shifted slightly, a small movement that somehow conveyed attention and consideration. He responded in the same language, his deep voice carrying authority and questions that seemed to probe for truth. The conversation continued for several minutes, with other warriors occasionally adding brief comments. Marcus stood perfectly still, knowing that his life hung on words he couldn't understand, trusting completely in the young woman beside him. Finally, Kaya turned to him. "They want to know exactly what happened, every detail. I've told them you saved my life, but Stormwalker thinks you might have caused my injuries first, then pretended to help me." Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. "What should I tell them?" "The truth, but let me translate." She looked directly at her brother as she began to speak, first in English for Marcus's understanding, then in Blackfoot for her people. "I was tracking a wounded deer yesterday. When the storm came, the lightning startled me, and I fell from the rocks near Pine Creek, breaking my arm and hitting my head." She paused, watching Stormwalker's face. "I crawled to the big tree for shelter, but I was bleeding and losing consciousness. I thought I would die there." The translation followed, and Marcus could see subtle changes in some of the warriors' postures. The story was believable. The area she described was known to be treacherous in storms. Kaya continued, "This man found me in the darkness and rain. He could have ridden past, could have left me to die. Instead, he carried me through the storm to his home. He set my broken arm, cleaned my wounds, and watched over me all night to make sure I lived." Redhawk raised his hand, stopping the translation. He spoke directly to Marcus in broken but clear English. "Show me." Marcus blinked in confusion. "Show you what?" Her arm, the medicine work. Understanding flooded through Marcus. They wanted to see his medical treatment, to judge whether it was the work of someone trying to help or someone trying to cover up abuse. Carefully, he helped Kaya extend her splintered arm. The war chief dismounted and approached, his movements fluid and controlled. He examined the splint work with the eye of someone who understood injuries and their treatment. The wooden splints were straight and well padded, the cloth bindings tight but not cutting off circulation. It was the work of someone who knew healing, not someone trying to hide evidence of violence. Redhawk looked at the bandage around Kaya's head, noting how carefully it had been applied, how clean the wound underneath appeared. Then he did something unexpected. He placed his hand gently on her forehead, feeling for fever, checking her eyes for signs of severe head injury. "You did this?" he asked Marcus, gesturing to the medical work. "Yes, I was a medic in the war. I know how to treat injuries." Redhawk stepped back and studied Marcus for a long moment. Then he spoke in Blackfoot to his warriors, his voice carrying a tone that hadn't been there before. Several of the men lowered their weapons slightly. Kaya smiled for the first time since they'd come outside. He said, "Your medicine work is good, better than good." He said, "You treated me like you would treat your own sister, with skill and honor. So we're safe?" "Not yet." Her expression grew serious again. "There's one more test. Stormwalker demands it." Her brother had dismounted and was approaching with purpose. He stopped 5 feet from Marcus and spoke rapidly in Blackfoot. Kaya's face went pale. "What?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. "He wants to know why you risked your life for someone you didn't know, someone whose people have been at war with yours. He says no white man does such a thing without expecting something in return." Kaya's voice was strained. "He wants to know what you want from me." The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Marcus looked at Stormwalker's fierce expression, at Redhawk's measuring gaze, at the circle of warriors waiting for his answer. Everything depended on the next words he spoke. Marcus looked directly into Stormwalker's eyes, knowing that his next words would determine whether he lived or died. The young warrior's hand rested casually on his tomahawk, and the tension in the circle was so thick it felt like breathing smoke. "I want nothing from your sister," Marcus said clearly, his voice carrying across the silent yard. "Nothing at all." Kaya translated quickly, but Stormwalker's expression didn't change. He fired back another question, his tone sharp and demanding. "He doesn't believe you," Kaya said quietly. "He says all white men want something. Land, gold, horses, women. He wants to know what you're hiding." Marcus felt frustration building, but he forced himself to stay calm. These people had every reason to be suspicious. Years of broken treaties and betrayals had taught them that white men's kindness usually came with a price. "Tell him this," Marcus said, never breaking eye contact with Stormwalker. 4 years ago, I saw men die in a war that didn't need to. Happen. Good men, brave men, dying because people couldn't see past their differences. I swore then that I would never let someone suffer or die if I had the power to help them, no matter who they were or where they came from. The translation took longer this time, and Marcus could see Kaya adding her own words, her own understanding of what he was trying to say. When she finished, Stormwalker studied Marcus for a long moment, then spoke again. "He wants to know if you would do the same thing again, knowing the danger it brought." "Yes," Marcus answered without hesitation. "Every time." Stormwalker turned to Redhawk and began speaking rapidly in Blackfoot. The conversation grew animated, with several other warriors joining in. Marcus caught the word that sounded like his name being repeated, along with others he couldn't understand. Finally, Redhawk raised his hand for silence. He approached Marcus, stopping close enough that they could speak quietly. Your heart speaks truth, the war chief said, in his careful English. But Stormwalker needs more proof. He says words are easy, actions are hard. What kind of proof? Red Hawk gestured toward the circle of warriors. We test you, not with weapons, but with choice. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Stormwalker untied a leather pouch from his horse and walked over to where Marcus stood. He poured the contents into his palm, revealing a handful of gold nuggets that glinted in the morning sun. Where we found Kaya, we also found this, Red Hawk explained. Gold from the sacred stream where our ancestors are buried. It is worth much money, enough to make a man rich. Marcus stared at the gold, understanding immediately what was happening. You're testing whether I'll take it. The gold was scattered. Where my sister fell, Stormwalker said in heavily accented English, speaking directly to Marcus for the first time. We think maybe she was running from someone who wanted to steal it. Maybe you. The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. I've never seen that gold before in my life. Then prove it. Stormwalker held out his hand, offering the nuggets to Marcus. Take it, is yours now. Payment for helping my sister. Marcus looked at the gold, understanding the trap perfectly. If he took it, he proved he'd been motivated by greed. If he refused it, he might prove his innocence, but he might also insult their attempt to honor his help. The silence stretched between them like a bowstring. Every warrior in the circle was watching, waiting to see what choice he would make. Marcus reached out slowly and took one small nugget from Stormwalker's palm. The young warrior's eyes flashed with what might have been anger, but Marcus wasn't finished. He walked over to where Kaya stood and gently placed the nugget in her good hand, closing her fingers around it. Gold belongs to the people whose ancestors are buried with it, he said simply. I just helped it find its way home. The effect was immediate and electric. Several warriors made sounds of approval, and Marcus could see Stormwalker's expression shift from suspicion to something approaching respect. Red Hawk smiled, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him. You passed the test, Marcus. Brennan, you see value in honor, not just in gold. Stormwalker approached his sister and spoke to her in their language. She smiled and nodded, then turned to Marcus. My brother says he misjudged you. He wants to know if you would accept the friendship of our people. Marcus looked around the circle of warriors, men who had come here ready to kill him, but were now offering acceptance instead. I would be honored. Red Hawk mounted his horse and spoke to his warriors. As one, they began to move, not in retreat, but in a formal procession around Marcus's ranch. It was a ceremony of protection, Kaya explained, marking his land as a safe place for their people. As the warriors rode away, Stormwalker lingered behind. He approached Marcus and extended his hand in the white man's custom. You saved my sister's life, he said in his careful English. Now you are family. After the last rider disappeared over the ridge, Marcus and Kaya stood together in the sudden quiet of his yard. The ordeal was over, but something deeper had begun. What happens now? Marcus asked. Kaya smiled, wincing slightly as she adjusted her broken arm. Now you learn that doing the right thing doesn't just save one life. Sometimes it changes everything. As if to prove her point, the sound of approaching horses reached them from the south. Not warriors this time, but a group of tribal elders led by an elderly woman whose presence commanded immediate respect. My grandmother, Kaya said with reverence. She's come to formally welcome you to our people. Marcus, you have no idea what you've started. Marcus looked at the approaching delegation, then at the young woman whose life he'd saved, and realized she was right. A simple act of compassion had opened doors he never knew existed, creating bonds that would change his solitary life forever. Sometimes the greatest rewards come not from what we take, but from what we give freely. What an incredible journey of courage, honor, and cross-cultural understanding. Marcus's simple act of compassion during a storm became a bridge between two worlds, proving that genuine kindness transcends all barriers. If this story inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us that our choices in difficult moments define who we truly are. What did you think of the gold test? Was Stormwalker right to be suspicious? And how do you think Marcus's life will change now that he's been accepted into the tribe? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our other incredible stories about courage, honor, and the unexpected consequences of doing what's right. Next week brings another tale of ordinary people facing extraordinary choices. Like this video, if Marcus's moral courage moved you, and remember that every act of genuine kindness creates ripples that can change entire communities. See you in the next story, where heroes are made not by strength, but by the courage to do what's right.